Now, I saw on the 7th of November while I was in prayer, I saw terror base and foundations being uncovered. I saw terror base and foundations being uncovered. So there is nothing that is done in the dark that will not be brought to the light.
Did money from Minnesota taxpayers earmarked to feed hungry children wind up in the hands of a Somali terrorist group? The allegations center around a massive welfare fraud case being brought in Minnesota. A 78th defendant was charged just today. And now reports are coming out that some of the stolen money may have wound up in the hands of al-Shabaab, a Somali-based terror group. In response, President Trump says he intends to end deportation protections for about 700 Somali nationals in Minnesota, calling Minnesota a, quote, hub for Somali gang networks, though he's provided no evidence for that.
Hi, Elizabeth. Well, we're at the federal courthouse where that 78th indictment came down just a few hours ago. All of it tied to Feeding Our Future. That's the corrupt nonprofit at the center of all of this fraud. We spoke with current and former federal sources, and they tell us billions have been stolen since 2019, that Minnesota is just riddled with fraud, and that a lot of this money goes back to Somalia, and a cut of all that money has gone to the al-Qaeda-linked terror group al-Shabaab. But I want to reset this for viewers because it's complicated. This all stems from Feeding Our Future. That's the largest COVID fraud ever. These criminals opened more than 200 federal child nutrition program sites throughout Minnesota, and sites lied, claimed to be serving meals to thousands of children a day. They created fake attendance rosters, fake invoices, and the government reimbursed them. David Gaither, he's a former state senator here. He saw this firsthand.
Even sponsors, even locations, these were published in newspapers according to the vision that the Lord gave to me. It says, terror-based uncovered.
Fraud. Let that word just set in for a minute. And it's front and center in Tim Walz's Minnesota, where a massive scandal involving taxpayer dollars being funneled to al-Shabaab's terrorists is unraveling.
There's been a sprawling web of schemes exploiting state programs to the tune of possibly $1 billion or even more, according to the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, and it's prompting state lawmakers to call for a federal investigation.
These expositions reveal even systems where funds were funneled through. So the crowdfunding, the funneling of the resources, where and how these resources were funneled, the Lord is bringing the light to expose each and every detail of what the enemy has been up to.
If we take a look at Minnesota's federally funded autism program. Now, several people, and this is an example, a woman in the Somali community, are co-conspirators, and they're accused of recruiting kids for autism therapy. They brought in families, had them convinced to get their kids diagnosed as autistic. In fact, these families ultimately ended up having various social services bid for their children, competing with the number size of check that they would get. It didn't matter if the kids had autism. And what happened? Autism claims to Medicaid surged. In 2018, $3 million. By 2023, listen here, from $3 million to $400 million. Autism providers jumped from 41 to 328 in 5 years. Now, City Journal reports that the Somali fraud rings send a lot of money back to Somalia. 40% of households in Somalia get remittances from abroad. That totals $1.7 billion. That is more than the entire budget of the Somali government. Money being sent abroad, from abroad, back to Somalia. Where is that money going? Take a look at this. Most alarmingly, a lot of that money is funneled through money traders, and in the end, ends up in the hands of al-Qaeda-linked Islamic terror group al-Shabaab. So to bring this full circle, the Minnesota taxpayers are funneling money through fraudulent autism claims back to Somalia, where that money lands in the accounts of al-Shabaab.
And so every sponsor, their financial network, their worldwide base and network, the Lord is bringing light to expose this darkness.
Ilhan Omar has opened up about the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota where hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that was supposed to be going to feeding hungry children was actually funding lavish lifestyles, being sent overseas to Somalia, and even reportedly ending up in the hands of terrorists. And as we spoke about last week, most of the people involved in this huge fraud scandal are from Minnesota's Somali community. But according to Ilhan Omar, Somalis are the real victims in all of this.
Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating.
And what does Ilhan Omar have to say about the allegations that American taxpayer dollars were being funneled to a foreign terrorist organization?
House Republicans and the Treasury Secretary just now talked about a link to terrorism, a possible link. He said they're just now beginning to look into it. How confident are you that that's a false claim?
I'm pretty confident at the moment because there are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they have stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them with these charges.
There are right now serious questions about how much Ilhan Omar knew about this fraud scandal in her district. Ilhan Omar introduced the bill that led to $250 million in fraud, but she says she was unaware of any wrongdoing. The New York Post is reporting that Ilhan Omar partied at one of the key restaurants named in the fraud case. This is the Safari restaurant. Its co-owner, Salim Ahmed Said, was found guilty in August of stealing over $12 million for claiming to serve thousands of meals during COVID, but instead of feeding hungry children, he was actually pocketing millions of dollars. And according to prosecutors, he blew much of that money on a $2 million mansion and on a $9,000 a month shopping spree. And as taxpayers were being scammed during COVID, Ilhan Omar appeared at that restaurant to praise the program. Another person, Gahad Hashi Said, who worked on Ilhan Omar's campaigns, pleaded guilty earlier this year to claiming to serve 5,000 meals a day, but instead was pocketing more than $3 million. And now the White House is warning that this Somali-linked fraud scandal in Minnesota that took place under Governor Tim Walz's watch is likely far worse than we think. Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller says that this may just be the tip of the iceberg.
Based on what we have found so far, we believe that the Somali fraud operation in Minnesota is the single greatest theft of taxpayer dollars through welfare fraud in American history. We believe that we have only scratched the very top of the surface of how deep this goes. And you're familiar with all the scams with pretending that children have autism who are not in fact autistic, with pretending to enroll people in food programs when in fact nobody was ever enrolled, and engaging in massive fraud, lying, and theft and grift on a scale we've never seen before in American history. The total bill, the total tab for this is going to be far beyond the numbers we've already seen reported. We believe the state government is fully complicit in this scheme, and we believe that what we are going to uncover is going to shock the American people.
Stephen Miller also noted that 75% of the Somali population in Minnesota is on welfare. And while Ilhan Omar wants Minnesota's Somali community to play the victim, it's worth noting that her net worth has skyrocketed since she's been in Congress. Despite denying claims that she is in fact a millionaire earlier this year, her latest financial disclosure shows that she had a reported net worth of up to $30 million. Her and her husband experienced a roughly 3,500% increase in net worth last year compared to 2023. Wow.
The funneling of the resources, where and how these resources were funneled, the Lord is bringing the light to expose each and every detail of what the enemy has been up to.